energy industry is complicated, and you all know we face a lot of challenges, whether it's weather events or an aging infrastructure. What steps do we take to ensure our resiliency, Bo?
So to face these challenges, we determined a few years ago that we need to focus on our system planning and how we can improve that so that it will allow us to be more proactive when it comes to mitigating risks throughout our system. And one of the strategic approaches that we're taking is optimizing how we collect and how we utilize our system data, essentially quantifying everything we do operationally.
We're doing things smarter instead of just throwing things out there to see what sticks.
Correct.
So what are some of the examples of what you're looking at in this decision-making process?
Looking at data that we collect, and before we've always collected data, but now we have the technologies that deploy that we collect so much, and before we just had this data stored, and now we're taking that data and trying to find underlying trends that will give us the intelligence to see anything from the weak areas of our system that we might need to address through system improvements or more maintenance. It also allows us to prioritize how we allocate our capital expenditure too throughout our system because we operate under a budget, and so we want to make sure that we effectively allocate those resources that continue so that our system continue to operate resiliently going forward.
So really looking at the economics and taking and evaluating incremental costs, but how do we capture all that data, Mick?
There's a few ways we do that. One way is through pole inspection. We try to go to every structure on our pole on a 10-year cycle. This year we're trying to do just over 10%, which is over 11,000 structures.
So what are they looking for when they do the inspections?
They check the pole to make sure that it hasn't decayed past a certain point. See if there's any animal damage, critter damage, people damage. They also collect inventory to see if that matches what's in our inventory that we have here in-house. And this year we also are taking a picture of every structure.
Wow, so the pictures, you said a couple of other things too. I want to touch on the critters. I know that's a big problem. What do you mean by critters?
Typically the worst problem is woodpeckers. We put in a new pole and our aim is for that pole to last 40 years, and woodpeckers are the biggest cause for the life expectancy to become short.
Well, and I know in some of the conversations there's some big dollars around woodpeckers, and they're not going anywhere, so you need to learn how to plan accordingly to mitigating solutions. I think is the one thing that you say, Bo. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we've always known that woodpeckers has always been an issue and shortened up, a lot of parts of our infrastructure throughout our system, but we didn't know how much. And so that's our approach is to ask more questions of how much, okay? How much did this cost and things like that. We also, with our research, with the data that we're collecting, specific towards, woodpecker damage, we found that it's a bigger number than what we imagined. So knowing that and what the magnitude of that cost is, it makes us focus more on that and how we can mitigate that. And so one of the ways that we're trying to improve on is to specify what areas are more problematic when it comes to woodpecker damage, so that we perhaps might spec out a different design with the poles that we install in that area that would mitigate that issue with woodpeckers.
So that data, and you said inventory, so those inventory parts, both of those things have to lie on a map somewhere, especially with the images that you said you're capturing. I know, Sarah, that's your expertise. Tell us about the mapping.
Right, so we have a GIS map that is essentially a road map of our service territory and infrastructure.
So you say GIS.
That stands for Geographic Information System.
Okay.
So our GIS database holds all the data collected through system studies done by Mick, field inspections, inventory collection during the field inspections, and it connects it with the location of the equipment.
So this map, I mean, we're talking over 5,200 miles of energized line.
Correct. So due to the size of our territory, we don't only use it for navigation, but we also use it for connectivity. So how the power travels from the substation down to the member's meter.
So that's a lot of data? I mean, how often are these maps updated?
So through continuous inspections, we're verifying our legacy data to make sure that what we think is in the field is actually in the field. And in addition to that, through all of the construction that we're doing, we're updating this mapping system daily.
So you said legacy system, that's our core system, but really what we've been building since 1939, right? We're building on that. There's maintaining what we have now and looking forward at the ability to meet the demands for new growth. I know, Joe, that's your purview. You want to tell us a little about that?
Yeah, new construction's up. We are really tremendously busy since about 2020. A lot of building going on, whether it's from residential housing to the developments in the area. I kind of compare it to the way we had a big up and swing in construction in the 1990s, the late 1990s, when the boom was going on here in Branson. A little bit different in the aspect of what's being done, but we're hooking services up to. But it's definitely, it has increased for us in the last 3 years. Ever since 2020 spring, even with COVID hitting, it paused for a little bit, but it went right back to where it was at. It's even beyond that now. One of the kind of the major projects that we've been dealing with the past year or so is these nightly rentals around Table Rock Lake. And it's basically like a subdivision development going in, but instead of 1 or 2 houses being built at a time, all 60 homes are being built at the same time. So that increases the demand that we have to have on our system for that capacity. And the big reason for that is typically years ago, the size of service that somebody had at their house was a 60 to 100 amp service. And then eventually that translated over to 200 amp size, and that's pretty much the norm of what everybody has at their house now. But we're seeing a trend where these bigger houses are getting 400 to 600 amp services. So that just increases the demand on our system for that load. And between Mick and I and Bo, we look at the analysis and the data and come up with a plan in order to upgrade our system in order to handle that capacity down the road and for anything in the future. But definitely construction has been up for us.
So we're talking about new growth and meeting the demands of our system expanding, but I think something that a lot of our members are familiar with is the outage process or when their power is out, and I know that mapping plays a big part of that. Sarah, tell us how that works.
Right, so some of the data collected by MIC through system studies allows for us to better pinpoint the outage location. So our dispatchers and our linemen can get the outage restored faster.
So everything that we're talking about here, essentially they can have on a map in their hands, in the field, in real time.
That's right, so not only is the dispatcher working off of the map in order to locate the outage, the lineman is also working off the map in his truck on an iPad in the field.
So there's a lot of things at play here to meet the demands on what we're doing today, moving into the future, making sure that our system is resilient and reliable for our members. Bo, do you want to tell us how we put it all together?
Well, with our approach to utilizing our data, more of our data that we collect, there's continuous system planning that has to take place. Not only meeting the demand of replacing old infrastructure that's reached the end of its life, but also meeting the demand of growth that we have going on in our service territory. What we do is that we cannot just look tomorrow, but we have to look years down the road because it takes time to develop our infrastructure going forward and to ensure that that because we operate within the budget, that we effectively allocate capital expenditures throughout our system and whatever improvements that need to be made to ensure that our system stays reliable going forward.
So system planning and resource management, everybody working together, that's how we stay resilient, which ultimately means reliability for our members, right? Guys, thank you so much for sharing today about what you do in and every day to meet the needs of each and every one of our members.